And so now we understand why we get esoteric wisdom from Egypt. The esoteric wisdom came from Joseph and from Enoch. Enoch is related to the Egyptian god Thoth. And Thoth was the one who wrote the sciences and gave all the wisdom and wrote it down in this great book. And so this is what we want to understand. What is this book? Because this book, the book of Enoch or the book of Thoth, was handed down, and the great pharaohs had this wisdom because they were in this great priesthood, this priest-king line, and they embodied this wisdom. Now there's a story in Egypt about a king named Setna. Setna was the son of Ramesses II, Ramosis. And it says that Setna was a great magician, and he was able to do all kinds of magical spells and incantations, and he could read the ancient hieroglyphs, and he was an amazing, one of the best there ever was. And he loved spending time studying the ancient hieroglyphs. And so one day, Setna was searching out all of the scrolls and all of the wisdom, and he was trying to learn everything he could because he wanted to be the greatest magician there ever was. And he wanted to understand everything about life. And he was reading these scrolls, and he found that 300 or 400 years before him, there was another pharaoh that had learned all of this wisdom and all of these enchantments and all of these great spells, and he could do anything. And his name was Neferkipta. And he found that this great pharaoh had all of this wisdom because he read a book called the Book of Thoth. And so he had to have this book. So he took his brother and he says, come on, we've got to find this book because according to this scroll, the Book of Thoth is laying on the chest of Neferkipta in his tomb. So we're going to go there and we're going to find this Neferkipta. And we're going to get this Book of Thoth, and I'm going to bring it back, and I'm going to be the greatest magician that ever was, because then I can enchant the heavens and the earth and learn the wisdom of the birds and the animals and all the creatures of the earth. So he travels with his brother all the way to the tomb of this dead pharaoh that had lived 300 or 400 years before him. And he says, I've got to have the Book of Thoth. And I am a pharaoh like you, and I'm going to have this, and I'm going to learn all this wisdom so I can enchant the heavens and the earth and learn all the wisdom of the birds and all the beasts. So he goes and he finds this tomb of this great pharaoh, and he basically speaks to his spirit because he's dead in the tomb, and his Ka. And he says, I've got to have this Book of Thoth. Of course, this great pharaoh says, no, because it will cause you great trouble. I'm telling you, you cannot have this book. It will cause you a lot of grief, just like it did me. It cost me my life and my wife and my children. And Setna says, well, no, I've got to have it, and I'll take it by force if I have to. And you know I had the right. Well, Neferkipta says, no, you can't have it. The only way you can get it is if you can beat me in a game of checkers. A game of draughts, as they called it. So, there were 52 points in this game of draughts. Now, this is what I've been telling you guys, that these ancient games, draughts are like checkers. And I guess the 52 points is just a symbolism of the fact that, see, there's 52 weeks in a year. And so this is talking about the game of life, astrology. And, you know, the tarot cards has 52 cards in a deck. There are 7 days in a week, and 5 and 2 is 7. So it's 7 times 7. It's a perfect period of time. Just like all things in astrology is all about time. And there are 12 hours in a day, and there's 12 months in a year. And there are 60 minutes in an hour, 60 seconds in a minute, and 6 times 6 is 36, and there's 360 degrees. And so this is this great science called astrology. So he had to play and win. So in this tomb, there was Neferkipta, and his wife and his son Meribah. And his wife's name was Ahura, which sometimes it's spelled Asura. And as we'll show later, I think that's Sarah. And so he says, I've got to have this book of Thoth. Well, the woman, his wife, Asura, spoke to him with her spirit. And she said, no, you should not even think about it, because this has caused us so much trouble. Let me tell you the story of how we found this book. My husband searched all the great wisdom, and he wanted to know all about the great magic and the writings that were on the great temple walls. And he wanted to understand the meaning of life. And he searched all the books, and he searched all the hieroglyphs and all the writings. And he was the greatest magician that ever lived. One day, as he was pouring through all of these ancient writings and these magical books, this priest pops up and says, he's laughing at him. He says, all of these books are worthless. It's all worthless. But I know a book that will give you all the answers to everything. And the very god Thoth wrote it with his own hand. And if you read that book, when you're done reading the very first page, you're going to know how to enchant the heavens and the earth. You're going to know what's in hell and what's in heaven. You'll be able to talk to the animals, to the birds, the beasts, and the reptiles. You're going to know everything. And when you get to the second page, you're going to have the secrets of the gods themselves, astrology. You're going to know all the wisdom of the stars. He says, oh boy, I've got to have this book. You've got to tell me where it is. He says, I'll tell you where it is. It's in the river Nile at the very bottom. And it lies in an iron box. And inside that iron box is a bronze box. And inside that box is a sycamore box. And in that one's an ivory and an ebony box. And inside that is a silver box. And inside that is a gold box. And there it is. There's the book of Thoth. And that book will give you all the wisdom and the knowledge of the whole universe. But the magician said, I warn you, don't get the book of Thoth, because if you read that book, it's going to cause you great trouble. So he went home and he told his wife, Asura, and she said, husband, please do not go and get this book, because it will cause you great trouble, and I don't want all of this trouble in our lives. But he wouldn't listen, so he took his wife Asura and his son Merib, and he went to this place in the river. And with these magical enchantments, he made a cabin, and he made the boat, and he put sand in the boat, and it sunk down to the bottom of the river Nile. And there at the very bottom, he found this box of iron with a box of bronze inside, and sycamore, and ebony, and ivory, and gold, and silver. And when he got down to that, it was surrounded by serpents and scorpions. And then around that was a coiled serpent that could never die. So he had to do all of this enchantment just to get this book of Thoth out of there. He had to kill all these scorpions and serpents and get through all these layers of boxes. And finally, the serpent could never die. So he'd go over there and chop its head off, and just about the time he was going to get into the box, the serpent would come back to life. And he could never win. And it was just over and over and over. And finally, he came up with a plan. He chopped that serpent's head off, and as it fell to the ground, he put some sand on both ends of the head and the tail. And when it tried to get back together, it couldn't go back together because it was sand. And so it just fell down helpless. And so then he went in and he got this book of Thoth, and he took it home. And he was the master. Well, when he got home, he was reading in it, and he was learning all these great enchantments, and it was so amazing. About that time, this beautiful, beautiful woman came to him. And she was more beautiful than any woman he'd ever seen. And he says, I've got to have this woman. So he goes over to this woman. He says, I've got to have you. Oh, I want to marry you. You're so beautiful. She says, well, sure. There's only one problem. I'm very jealous, and I'm not going to have any of these other women around. I'm going to have to be the only woman. You can't, split my affection up. So you're going to have to let me kill your wife and take your children, and they've got to be executed in the street. And he said, oh, no problem. Just go ahead and do whatever you got to do because I've got to have you. So about this time, he realizes what had happened. And he basically wakes up and realizes that, oh my goodness, I've killed my wife and my children, and I'm a miserable wretch, and I didn't listen when they said don't get this book of Thoth. He ends up, the story goes on and on. He ends up drowning, and his wife drowns, and they're lying there dead. And this is what happened because they wanted the book of Thoth. And now Setna is standing before them, and he hears the story of how terrible this book will be. And he says, no, I still got to have it. I desire this book, and I'm going to have it. So Neferkeptah wakes up, and he says, you've heard everything my wife told you about this book and what it caused us and our death and all this trouble and calamity, and you still want this book. The only way you're going to get this book is you're going to have to play me a game of draughts, a game of checkers, and for 52 points. This game, like I said in the last video, these games that we have today, checkers and dominoes and dice and all of these games, card games, they're all remnants of this ancient wisdom of astrology. So he had to play this game, and he had to win the game of life, and it took time. Everybody's going to play this game to get this book, and in the end it's just nothing but trouble. We come here and we live and we learn and we suffer. And where is this book? It's in the Nile River. The Nile River, like I've said in many of my videos, represents the Milky Way. And this is we all are in the Milky Way, going down through the stars and going through the zodiac, taking on ourselves all these personalities and overcoming all these forces and animalistic carnal nature that we go through. All this animalistic carnal nature that we go through. We have to learn and grow. And in the end, it's just trouble. And the only way out of this place is death. And so this book of Thoth is the wisdom of this world. And it's in the stars, and it's in our lives, and it's in the lines on your hand. And it's something that you got to interpret, that you've got to understand. The book of Thoth has all the wisdom in the world. It's life itself. And really, the book of Thoth, this whole story, what it's saying is that there is no book written with ink that can save you. All the knowledge in the world can't save you. The only way that we can be saved is through experience, and it's a very troublesome thing. We all have to learn through experience on our own. We all have to gain knowledge. And so this then is what the book of Thoth really is, friends. But I wanted you to notice that this Pharaoh's wife was Asura. See, this is the name Sarah, and this king was Abraham. And so, if you go to Egypt, there is a city in Egypt on the Nile River that's called Tanis. And in the Bible, that city is called Zoan. It mentions it in the Old Testament. Well, many have said that Zoan is the same as our word Zion. And this was this city. And right next to that city is a city called Assur. That's his wife. And that was the city of the great queen, Assura. And many have said that that is the name Sarah. And so, everything that's in Egypt, in all of the history, in all of this ancient wisdom, the book of Thoth is the book of Enoch. And all of the patriarchs come down, have all the same names. After this pharaoh called Eber, in about 2000 BC, there was a pharaoh called something Eber. It's an epithet. That was probably Abraham. And his son is Jacob-Har. And Jacob-Ar, many scholars have said, is probably the pharaoh Jacob. You have Amenhotep and many Hoteps. This Hotep is sometimes, they say it Hoshep or Joseph. And so many of the pharaohs have the same names. And as I've said before, we know for a fact that the Psalms and the Book of Wisdom, the Book of Ecclesiastes, the Song of Solomon, it was written by David and Solomon, were actually written by the pharaohs of Egypt. And this is something that's common knowledge. You can look that up on Google, friends. So I think I'll leave it there, friends. And this is really, really deep stuff, and we're going to get into this more in coming videos. So I hope you guys have a great day. I'm going to go ahead and leave it there. We'll see you tomorrow.